The Little Mermaid is an adorable classic. It's a really sweet movie, but does it have the best message? I'd have to say no. There are plenty of people that criticize the original movie for the questionable actions of the main character, but despite that, it's still an extremely beloved classic. Why is that? That's because the original creator of The Little Mermaid wasn't focused on teaching the audience a life lesson, but instead focused on telling a story through the characters. The same goes for Snow White. The film doesn't really have a lesson to teach the audience, and instead is just trying to tell the story of Snow White. When we pick up a novel and read it, are we reading it because we want to learn a valuable lesson from the author? I think that's the issue with a lot of modern day movies, especially in particular current Disney movies. Due to Disney's main demographic being children, there's that pressure to have that valuable life lesson learned at the end of each story so the parents can feel that their children is getting something productive out of these films. However, due to that, the story can and unfortunately does suffer along with the characters. The film Raya and the Last Dragon comes to mind along with Strange World. These films had clear messages they wanted to convey through the story, but the story often conflicted with the message. Which begs the question, does every movie we watch have to have a message for it to be a good movie? I don't think so. It is fun to watch a movie and analyze all the nuances. Sure, it makes us feel smarter, and YouTube careers have been made doing this, but it also takes away the enjoyment of watching a movie because in a sense we're already looking for things to criticize. When it comes to the Little Mermaid remake, obviously everyone had something to say about it, especially with who they cast as Ariel. The decision has already been made, and instead of criticizing the decision, I would prefer to focus on the writing choices and how well the actors portrayed their characters. I am aware of the contradiction I made for myself, but nonetheless, this is a deep dive video. Because so much time has passed, I've already seen a bunch of reviews for this film, and I'm aware of some of the changes that was made, but I will do my best not to judge based on the company that made this film, but instead focus on the story itself. With all that said, let's dive into The Little Mermaid. I hate to complain so early into the film, but the title reveal feels misplaced, especially when we get to the reveal of Atlantis. It's mainly due to the music and how it swells. It just feels like that's where the title should have appeared. I think it would do films in general good if more care was put into the title reveals again. They become too much of a blink and you miss it moment. The film opens with a group of men hunting what they think is a mermaid, and I think I know why they put that in there. In the animated film, the subject of mermaids is almost non-existent, and the belief in mermaids did not play a role in the film. But in the remake, it does play a role in the motivation of Ariel's character, but it was a one-sided issue, I think. I know that a lot of people has had a laugh making fun of the fact that Trident has various multicultural daughters, and it could have worked. If Trident is the king of the sea, it makes sense that he would have his offspring oversee different parts of the ocean since he can't be everywhere at once, and it also gives the idea that Atlantis is not the only kingdom in the entire ocean. However, it is implied that they all come from the same woman. Is it really that controversial to cast actors that look like they came from the same parents? I'm also a little confused by how they chose to reveal Trident. It makes it appear that he can summon himself wherever he likes. In the animated movie, Flounder says that he can't swim as fast as Ariel, and they brought that up in the remake. However, when they're being chased by the shark, Flounder, who is half the size of his animated counterpart, doesn't seem to have an issue keeping up with Ariel. It would have been nice if the remake actually did something with this information, such as when the chase ensued, Ariel scoops Flounder into her bag during the chase because he was having trouble keeping up, but she accidentally drops it, and when the shark goes after it, that's when she drops the barrel. As for the gender swap of Scuttle, I really couldn't care. His gender didn't really have anything to do with his character because he was mainly there as comedic relief. As for the swap of the type of bird Scuttle is, obviously it was for this ridiculous info dump about Ariel not allowed to go to the surface, but she's right there at it, and yet she doesn't seem at all interested in it and just asks about the dingle hopper she found. God, I really hate this scene right here. I have no issue with how Halle Bailey performed the song Part of Your World. She has a nice voice. However, I don't like this. In anime and animated movies, this is typical and we're used to seeing this, but it just does not transfer well in live action. Especially not the way it was shot here. One more thing I want to address, Ariel is more aggressive in this version compared to the animated movie, where she handles her collection with care. I think what they were trying to go for was her being restless and wanting new experiences. However, this collection is supposed to be her prized possession, and her aggression just makes it a little questionable. I also don't like how they executed her going to the surface. Her expression makes it come off as if she's doing this out of spite rather than curiosity. That's the thing about the animated version. Ariel doesn't act out of spite or anger, it's always out of curiosity and sometimes out of pain. When her father literally loses his shit and destroys her collection, she doesn't go to Ursula out of anger. Ursula comes to her because Ariel is emotionally vulnerable after what her father did. This is what annoys me about this remake. By adding that extra layer of Ariel never been to the surface, I would think the obvious direction for her character would be for her to be somewhat consistently distracted by the temptation of the surface world. By having her gaze at it or maybe even swim towards it, but something always stops her before breaching. At least in the animated version, Ariel was already somewhat familiar with the surface world, and throughout the film we saw her getting more bolder until finally she made the deal that would allow her to explore the land. In the remake, this is Ariel's first time above water. This entire experience is new to her and she just goes all out. There's no hesitation displayed from her. She climbs onto a ship and pets animals that she's never seen before, not to mention all hell breaks loose not too long after, which kind of validates her father's concerns. Because this is the very first time Ariel has ever been to the surface. How does a room of professional writers not notice the issue this could cause to the character or the story? I'm aware of the issues with the CGI, but let's talk about some of the editing. Do you see how close Ariel is to the boat? Not to mention, Eric has already fallen into the water, so the men should be looking at the water trying to spot him, and no one spotted Ariel, even from the corner of their eye as she dived. Here's another questionable edit. When Ariel's on the beach with Eric, she hears his men calling out to him. It cuts to them on a decently sized hill, and it does appear that they have spotted Eric, but when it cuts back to the beach, Ariel is still with him, so how the hell do they not see her? As for the scene that everyone said is creepy, I think what could have made this scene a little more wholesome is if she was still underwater smiling about what just happened, and then she starts climbing onto the rock while singing and makes her declaration. When it comes to music, I'm honestly not all that picky, but when it comes to musicals, I can be very biased, especially when people do covers. I mostly go for the original version or the version that I hear first. The Hunchback of Notre Dame is my favorite Disney musical, and the number one thing I detest when it comes to these remakes is the addition of new songs to a already existing musical. They just all seem so unnecessary, and they're just nowhere near as catchy musically, and the lyrics don't hit the same. With that said, I'm surprisingly kind of digging Prince Eric's song, but the transition from him on land to the ship after his argument with his mother just lost me. I like the first part of the song, but the ending, it just got corny for me. Also, it's implied later in the movie that Eric has not been allowed to leave the palace since the shipwreck, so the transition from him singing on land and then on the ship makes no sense. As for Under the Sea, why is Ariel singing? I know why Holly Bailey is singing, it's probably in her contract. To her agents, this is probably a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to campaign her talents globally, and they don't have to pay for it. The whole point of the song is that Sebastian is trying to convince Ariel that everything she needs is under the sea, as her curiosity for the surface grows now that she's developed a crush for someone on the surface. As for the ending of the song, they kinda took away the purpose of her leaving during the song, so I don't know why she wouldn't stick around till the end, especially when she was singing along. The editing choices are very questionable. Okay, let's go ahead and unpack the mother issue. Apparently, a human killed Ariel's mother, and it heavily affected Trident to the point that he forbade all of his subjects, including his family, from ever going to the surface. It's implied that when this happened, Ariel was very young to the point that she probably doesn't remember her mother, so in a sense, it could be argued that she doesn't feel that she's lost anything, unlike the rest of her family that did know her mother.
You were just a child when mother died and father stopped us going to the surface.
Here's the issue with that. It's one thing to lose a loved one by the means of something that can't be helped, such as an incurable illness. However, when the cause of death is by the hands of another human being, that can cause the loss to be far more traumatic because it's the kind of death that can be avoided. That's why Trident is taking such drastic measures to make sure it doesn't happen again, because he doesn't want to lose anyone else. It's understandable that Ariel doesn't exactly see things the same way the rest of her family does, but due to the way it's been written, it makes her come off callous towards her feelings, which brings up another issue.
Why blame every human? Mother wouldn't.
No.
Ariel argues that her mother wouldn't want her father to act like this, but due to it being implied that she doesn't really remember her mother, how can she argue to know what her mother would want? Also, how the hell did this line make it all the way into production? Did no one proofread the script?
They're not the only ones who have no respect for balance.
What does that mean? What balance is Ariel talking about? I am very confused by this line. I don't know what to make of it. One of the things I love about movies is the conversations. I love a good conversation that comes off as natural as breathing, and this was not it.
You broke the rules. You went to the above world.
There was a shipwreck. A man was drowning. I had to save him.
We know the issue isn't Javier. We know that man can act. He's not doing a good job here, but we do have proof. So either the issue was Holly or the director, and it could also be due to how they shot it because of all the heavy CGI. Either way, the conversation was not great, so let's break it down.
You should have let him drown. There's have a chance.
You don't know that.
Why would they have Ariel say that, especially when this is their next line?
Why blame every human? Mother wouldn't.
No.
Again, it's implied that Ariel doesn't remember her mother, so how the hell would she know what her mother would want? This makes her character come off very ignorant because she's not considering her father's feelings, and yeah, she's a teenager, but still. This man's wife was murdered and was left to raise his daughters by himself. Yeah, he probably had servants helping him, but it's not the same. I will say that Trident's response was well done. Instead of snapping at Ariel, which I wouldn't blame him for, he instead keeps his composure, which is an issue within itself.
They killed your mother.
I know. But one man did. Why blame every human? Mother wouldn't.
No.
This conversation kind of reminds me of Hotel Transylvania, that has a similar conflict. Dracula's wife was killed by humans, and as a result, he's developed more of a fear than a hatred for them. However, his daughter Mavis is fascinated by them and wants to get to know them. Dracula eventually gets over his disdain for humans by being forced to spend time with one. With The Little Mermaid, I think what helped change Trident's mind was the fact that Eric risked his life to kill Ursula and save Ariel. He would have had to have known that, otherwise the next time he saw him, he would have been completely bewildered. But I'm jumping too far ahead. Let's go back to the conversation.
Mother wouldn't.
No. Enough. That's enough.
And Eric had nothing to do with it.
Eric? Eric? Have you lost your senses completely?
If you would have just heard him, Father. He's compassionate and kind.
He's a human! You're a mermaid!
Yes, but that doesn't make us enemies.
This man is giving his daughter so much leniency. Instead of punishing her, all he's asking is that she doesn't go back to the surface, and she refuses. I do like that Ariel admits that she can't lie to him, but it's weird that out of everything that she said, this is what breaks him, and this is the issue I was talking about earlier. When showcasing someone having an absolute meltdown, the last thing I would expect to see is them calming themselves down before losing their shit. That shows that they have self-control, which is the opposite of what this scene is trying to convey. In the animated version, Trident interrupts Ariel multiple times, and as the conversation continues, he keeps raising his voice, showing that he is losing control of himself. When it's over, Trident is so ashamed of his actions that he can't look at his crying child, let alone say anything to console her. In the remake, Trident displays a level of control throughout the conversation, and as he's leaving, he says this.
Never leave again.
Do you hear that tone? This is a man that is neither remorseful of his actions or concerned with the emotional damage he just caused to his child. I wasn't sure if I wanted to address the statue or not, but let's go ahead and do it. The statue did play a role in the animated movie. Originally, it was a statue of Prince Eric, and part of the reason for it was to show how humble Eric is. It also unironically shows what people think of Eric, specifically Grimsby. He proudly presents it because it's a token of his appreciation for Eric along with his admiration for him. That's why Eric is posed in such a confident way. When it sinks into the ocean, it causes a chain reaction. When we see Ariel interact with the statue, she is very obviously content and could have stayed that way because the statue was a substitute for the real thing, but because Trident destroyed it, it gave Ursula the leverage to tempt Ariel with the real thing. It's ironic how a minor change can change the outlook of how the chain of events occurs. With all that said, let's go ahead and dive into Ursula. First of all, I like Melissa McCarthy, and I have enjoyed some of her movies. However, would she have been my first choice for Ursula? No. As for the performance of Poor Unfortunate Souls, I'm sure you've come across at least one video complaining about this version, and I'm probably going to repeat what's already been mentioned, but let me say my piece and we'll move on. With the line pathetic, Ursula is saying that to the eels while trying to conceal that she's saying that from Ariel. But in the remake, she blatantly says it to Ariel.
I use it on behalf of the miserable, lonely and depressed. Pathetic.
The point of the song is that Ursula is trying to convince Ariel that she's somewhat of a good person and that she can trust her. The point of the line pathetic is to reveal that she's not as wholesome as she's trying to make herself out to be. By saying that line in front of Ariel, she's straight up admitting that she's a bitch. There is another line in the song that alludes to Ursula's villainous tendencies.
Now it's happened once or twice. Someone couldn't pay the price, and I'm afraid I had to rake 'em across the coals. Yes, I've had the odd complaint, but on the whole, I've been a saint.
However, she excuses it by insinuating that because they didn't hold up their end of the bargain, she had no choice but to do what she did. She even acts remorseful. However, all of this is thrown away in the remake the moment she calls him pathetic in front of Ariel because she's admitting that she looks down on all those that come to her for help. I assume they took out the images of Ursula's victims to make it less obvious of her nefarious deeds, but in later shots we see her flaunting skulls around. Let's not forget to mention the skeleton at the entrance. What the hell was the point of changing that one line if there's 3 other examples that incriminates Ursula's character even more? When it comes to Ariel's new song, I get why they added it. I just don't like the song. It also doesn't help how little emotion is being shown from the actress Holly. I don't know if Holly has any prior acting besides music videos, but from what I've seen so far, she is coming off as the weakest actor in the film. The emotions that she portrays is very subtle, which is a really big issue. Ariel is a very expressive character because she can't communicate with words.
And don't underestimate the importance of body language. Ha!
It's clear the animators were very meticulous in making sure that you could always tell what Ariel was feeling at all times. As for Holly, there's no excitement on her face. She's got a blank expression while a song is being sung in her head about exploring this new land. From what I'm hearing, the tone of her voice sounds as if she's supposed to be excited, but there's just no expression on her face, which makes the scene contradict with the tone of the song. To my knowledge, Ariel in the animation isn't interested in fire, and I would think that's due to her last encounter with it when the ship went down. It's pretty clear that was her first encounter with fire, and I don't blame her for losing interest after that experience. But in the remake, Ariel touches fire because apparently that's her first time seeing it, even though she's already seen the damage it can do to a ship. I blame the song. I doubt this would have been put in the movie if it wasn't for these lyrics.
Look, it's a fire, it's warm and it glows and it lights this chamber. Let me admire it, I'll get too close and it bites. I came to...
This is why I protest adding new songs to pre-existing musicals. I'm not sure how I feel about this version of Ariel arriving at the palace. Originally, Eric was the one that finds her and decides to bring her back with him because she generally looked like she needed help. In the remake, it's a fisherman that finds her and he decides to randomly take her to the palace instead of maybe taking her to a doctor first. After some gossip, a servant brings Eric to her only to be immediately rejected. The issue with this is by having Eric be the one that finds Ariel, that immediately puts a sense of responsibility on him to take care of her. However, due to the changes in the remake, there's this disconnect where he's not responsible for her because he wasn't the one that found her. So far, I have no issue with how Eric and Ariel interacts with each other. I like that they extended their interactions, but I'm not that crazy with the carriage scene, especially with all the extra obstacles they put in. I like that they had Ariel interact with the people on the island, but Holly is just not that good of an actor and it painfully shows. This scene where Ariel eats a flower comes out of nowhere. I get that the surface world is different from the ocean, but it'd be nice if we got a scene prior to this where Ariel eats seaweed or something so we can draw reference to when she eats the flower. When it comes to the lagoon, I would have liked for Ariel to kind of look at the water and maybe even walk towards it, insinuating that she's kind of starting to miss her home, and Eric takes this as her wanting a boat ride. She's been on a ship twice, so it's a little curious why she would be interested in a rowboat all of a sudden. I don't know why, I just wanted to change that. As for Kiss the Girl, I put off talking about the kiss until we got to this scene because I wanted to see if there was somewhat of a rational explanation for the memory loss bit, and nope. And it kind of changed the narrative.
Don't forget about the kiss. No, not me. The prince. You gotta kiss the prince. Don't you remember? You only have 3 days to... Hello? Oh, no. She's put a spell on you. You can't remember, can you?
From the way Sebastian and Ursula talks, it's the kiss that Ariel doesn't remember, but when Ursula takes Ariel back into the ocean, it appears that she doesn't remember the deal at all.
are you doing? Let go of me!
Not a chance. You made a deal, remember? 3 days, no kiss? Yeah, is it all coming back to you?
The reason why this is a problem is because it changes the motive, the momentum, and the dynamic of the film. By having Ariel not remember that she needs to kiss the prince to be human, she loses that desire to want to be human. She obviously still cares for Eric, but she loses her motive for why she's there and why she wants to be with him. At this point, this 3-day excursion might as well be a vacation. This is Ariel's story. We are following Ariel. She is the driving force to the events of the plot. However, because of her memory loss, the urgency that the main character would be feeling has been pawned off to another character, meaning the side characters, Sebastian and Flounder. Due to this, the story loses its momentum and urgency because, to put it bluntly, we are watching this movie for Ariel's reactions, not the side characters. It also doesn't help that we can't see the side characters' expressions. Even if Sebastian and Flounder could make half-decent expressions, it still doesn't negate the fact that we are watching this film for Ariel's responses. Now on to the infamous Scuttlebutt song. It's and I honestly feel sorry for Awkwafina for having to sing it. It honestly goes to show how little people think of children nowadays. Think about it. The Little Mermaid is originally a kids film, and yet every song was carefully crafted to tell something important about the situation. Here, it feels like it was a last-minute decision only because they could and not because it was needed. Also, the lyrics are describing a traditional Western-style wedding, but the movie is set in 18th century Jamaica. I'm curious to know how accurate the lyrics are to the time period. Here's another questionable editing decision. Ariel looks to be swimming out into the ocean, and yet the land is right behind her. I'm also confused by Eric. In the animated version, it's clear that he's been put under a spell, specifically to forget about Ariel, but in the remake, he seems fully cognizant and even asks about Ariel.
Have you seen Ariel?
According to the servants, she left the castle early this morning.
Left?
Can you blame her, Eric? I don't understand. This is not like you.
I have a theory about this, but I don't want to share it just yet. Let's move on for right now. Lore-wise, I'm aware that Ursula and Trident are siblings, but there was a reason why it wasn't addressed in the original film. It wasn't important to the story. In the remake, they confirm that Trident and Ursula are siblings, so logically, I assume that there is a reason for this addition and that it was going to be revealed when these two had their confrontation over Ariel. Nothing was explained, which was curious given Ursula's motives seemed to have amplified in this version. She didn't just want to be the ruler of the sea, she straight up wanted to kill her brother, and she did. I think that deserves a bit of an explanation, but if we ever get one, which makes me wonder why the bother in the first place. Now let's finally talk about Eric. After watching this film, I am convinced that the writers was deliberately trying their damnedest to bastardize his character. They took so much agency away from him. They took away his statue that played a key role in the chain of events. Eric did technically save his dog, but for some reason they had Ariel play a hand in that. They took away his legitimacy as a royal, which made no sense. They made it more obscure that Eric was under a spell. And lastly, it's Ariel that killed Ursula, not Eric. What the hell was all these changes for? What significance did these changes add to the story? What do most of these changes have in common? This is going to sound very conspiratorial, but I got to get this off my chest. I think the reason for these changes was that the writers wanted, needed, or were told to do this so this version of Ariel could come off more virtuous. I know how this sounds, but this is the only thing that I can think of that makes sense of the changes they did, not only to Eric's character, but also Ariel as well. When it comes to the statue, I think the motive behind this change was that they didn't want to show this version of Ariel pining and fantasizing about Eric like she did in the animated movie. As for the dog, he was literally right there at the boat. I don't know why they had Ariel step in at the last second. It's not like they showed the dog struggling to swim or whimpering. Clearly this was done to make Ariel's character more admirable. The legitimacy thing? I can't think of any reason why they did that. It did not play any significant role in the story. I don't know if perhaps they thought it was too cliche or privileged for two royals to come together. Maybe they thought it would be more romantic or relatable if one of them came from humble beginnings. As for Eric being put under a spell, it was obvious in the animated movie, but in the live action, it's very obscure, and I do think it was done on purpose. For what reason? Logically, I think it was done to make it less obvious to the people around him that he was acting strange or out of character, but it was actually acknowledged by the Queen that he hasn't been acting the same since the shipwreck, so that explanation has less merit. Again, I want to stress that the whole point of him being put under a spell was to forget about Ariel. Now onto the killing blow. I think the motive for this change was that Ariel got saved multiple times in both versions, between Eric coming to Ariel's rescue and her father giving up his crown, power, and his life to break her contract with Ursula. In the end, I think they wanted Ariel to fix the mess that she caused rather than having someone else do it for her. Don't get me wrong, it's still a shit decision. I'm just trying to make it make sense for my own sanity. Now let's talk about the ending of the movie. After Ursula is dealt with, Ariel at first tried to reunite with Eric, but when she sees the trident, she inevitably chooses to go after it. Clearly she does this because she doesn't want such a powerful weapon to fall into the wrong hands, and then her father magically comes back to life. Ariel tries to convince Trident that Eric helped her in stopping Ursula, but Trident's not hearing it, and honestly, it's a bit of a stretch. Also, I can't help but feel that there was some weird statement being made by having Ariel return the Trident to her father. Maybe I'm just reading too much into it, but something felt off. Anyway, when it cuts to Eric swimming to shore, his character does a 180. This man rowed out into the middle of the ocean to save the woman he fell in love with, and when he reaches the shore, he's ready to go back out there to find Ariel, but it's the queen that stops him, and that's when Eric speaks out of character, essentially giving up on Ariel. The queen then speaks, and the lines they give her infuriates me.
We need a boat. Grimsby, we have to find her.
And then what? And then what, Eric? Tell me.
You were right. I was chasing after a fantasy girl.
No, I was wrong. She was very real. And so were your feelings for her. I see that now.
Let's talk about the queen now. I don't dislike her character, and the actress that plays her does a phenomenal job with what she's given, but I dislike her role in the movie. Besides the fisherman very early in the movie mentioning mermaids, the queen is the only other person that talks about them as if they do exist, but everyone else pretty much dismisses it as folklore. The way they have her talk about it comes off as if she's aware of Atlantis.
It's just that our worlds were never meant to be together.
It honestly sounds as if she's trying to prevent the two worlds from interacting, similar to Trident. However, if that was the case, I would think it would be more favorable for her to dismiss mermaids as folklore. It almost felt like the writers couldn't decide which route they wanted to take her character, which makes her character so confusing to me. The scene where Trident decides to let Ariel go is such a beautiful and heartbreaking scene that I have no doubt most parents can relate to. What makes this scene more wholesome in the remake is the fact that this is Trident's last child. The rest of his daughters are scattered throughout the seven seas. However, due to how they presented Ariel and Trident's relationship, this scene doesn't invoke the emotions the way the animated version did. This scene just feels so disingenuous. It also doesn't help that we don't see Ariel's response to what she's being given. This is a father giving his child his blessing. Instead of showing it when it's happening, they opt to hold out until this. The big issue I have with this change is due to the increase in time. Time plays a big role in how characters respond to things. If there's a crisis happening and there's no time to respond, then you can expect your characters to act emotional and irrational. Even if the character makes a stupid decision, we often can forgive that decision if the character is given no time to properly collect themselves. That's why Ariel made the deal with Ursula, because she wasn't given any time to calm down from the emotional high that was caused by her father. She was riding that high throughout her encounter with Ursula, and when Ariel was finally coming down from it and starts to question the situation, that's when the song starts to speed up as Ursula forces Ariel to make a choice then and there. The scene where Ariel is saying goodbye to Eric goes by the same principles, except it's centered around Trident this time. Last time Trident and Ariel was together, Trident lost his temper and destroyed Ariel's collection. After that, for 3 days, he believed his child ran away, and as far as he knew, it was his fault. So for those 3 days, that guilt has obviously been eating away at him. How could it not? When Flounder reveals the truth and Trident goes to confront Ursula, this man has to be riding on a high of emotions. I have no doubt he's furious at Ursula while angry at himself, and let's not forget all that guilt that's been eating up at him. It's also interesting to see how Ursula changes her approach between the two. With Ariel, she's soft-spoken, but as Ariel starts to second-guess her, Ursula becomes agitated, and I even say slightly desperate, but she clearly tries to keep her composure. That's the whole point of the song speeding up. With Trident, she is composed and confident even when Trident blasts her, which is terrifying because that shows she's in control. The remake ignores this concept and opts to do the sympathetic villain without giving us any real context as to why we should feel sorry for her. Show us, don't tell us. When Trident takes his daughter's place, he is helpless at this point and is forced to watch everything unfold, probably still believing that all of this is his fault. So when the situation finally gets resolved, he's still riding on that high of guilt and is obviously trying to decide what's the best decision to make after all of this. That right there is the difference between these supposedly identical scenes. Trident in the animated version is evaluating the situation and realizing this all happened because he refused to see that his daughter was not happy. And I mean that literally. Remember the cave? He refused to look at her while she was crying. And his last 2 lines beautifully sums up his character growth without over-explaining it.
She really does love him, doesn't she, Sebastian? Then I guess there's just one problem left.
And what's that, Your Majesty?
How much I'm going to miss her.
That first line is him acknowledging that despite what he can provide, she just won't be happy, and that last line is self-explanatory. In the remake, after Trident comes back to life, he looks pissed, but can you really blame him? However, this scene heavily brings down the message, the tone, and especially the character, specifically Trident.
I didn't fight alone, Father. Eric was with me.
All that matters now is that you're safe and home, where you belong.
This shows that he not only refuses to hear Ariel out, but also doesn't acknowledge the role he played in the chain of events, which stagnates his character and just makes him come off controlling. Part of the point of the climax in the movie was for Trident to realize that he fucked up as a parent. When Trident finally has his character growth, it doesn't feel satisfying because it took God knows how long for him to see that his child is not happy, and half the scene, he's not even looking at Ariel, which defeats the purpose. What the fuck? Not to mention, every interaction in this remake between Ariel and Trident suggests that their relationship is nowhere near as close as their animated counterparts are. Especially since in the remake, Ariel calls Trident father instead of dad or daddy, which unfortunately downplays the emotions in this scene. Do you hear the difference? I'm not saying Halle Bailey should copy Jodie Benson's portrayal of Ariel, but if Halle had just addressed her father as dad every now and then, something similar to this, I love you, Dad, that would have greatly helped with the unbalanced dynamic between these two characters. In the animated movie, Ariel is a daddy's girl. That is made 100% clear. In the remake, she comes off as the runt of the litter that needs to prove herself. Also, I want to quickly mention that I don't like the dress. It wasn't flattering. I can kinda get why they changed it. Ariel's dress in the animated movie was a bit sensual, but they could have given Holly a more simpler dress to wear and it would have been much more flattering than this frumpy thing. Finally, the very ending. Given everything that they added onto the story, the ending felt rushed. The revelation of coexisting felt forced, not to mention Trident's giving his blessing twice at this point, which kinda undervalues what he already did for Ariel by granting her wish to live on land. And finally, the final shot. This was not visually appealing. I get what this scene was supposed to represent, but it could have been done better. Especially since I have seen this exact shot hundreds of times in other movies, and most of the time, these shots are fillers. And Ariel isn't even looking forwards. She's sideways, which defeats the message of this shot. I swear that they put this in specifically because they did not want to end the movie identical to the animated movie, even though that is a beautiful picture-perfect shot to end the movie with. Home stretch, guys, we're getting there. The acting wasn't the greatest, but it wasn't the worst. The actor who played Eric, I think he was the best part in the film. I thought he was charming despite what I believe they were trying to do to his character. Melissa, who played Ursula, was the second best part in the film. I also gotta say, the actress that played Ursula in disguise kinda caught my attention. As for Holly, she was not right for the role, and it's not for the reasons you think. I've listened to her music. She's a very good singer, and she is visually striking to look at. She also has this innocence about her that did work to her advantage, but she just did not have the acting experience necessary to breathe a new life into this character that is well established and well beloved. Throughout this video, I've been comparing the two Ariels, and nothing about Holly's version was memorable or stood out to me, and it was heavily due to her lackluster performance. Even though I did not like Holly's portrayal of Ariel, I don't hold it against her. I think she did her best, which I think says more about the director and producers. Let's move on to the graphics. It's bearable, but there was some rough areas, notably this scene. Right here, it was literal shit. Not to mention the design choice for Flounder. There was some scenes where he almost completely disappeared into the background because he was that unnoticeable. He's yellow. They couldn't find one yellow fish in the Caribbeans? As for Sebastian, it felt like there was no point to his character in this remake. Part of what made Sebastian so memorable and lovable was his expressions and how you felt sorry for him. This tiny little crab has such a demanding voice but had no authority, even though he did act like he did. And that's what makes his character so charming. The remake version of him, you could not see his expressions, which forces the character to heavily be reliant on the voice actor to express what they're feeling, and it did not work for me. The voice actor they used did not have the strong vocal range to properly express this little crab's frustration. I don't know if it was the voice he used or if it was the actor in general. Now onto the underwater graphics. The biggest issue I had with it was feeling that every scene looked too close to the surface, including Atlantis. Correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't Atlantis supposed to be really deep in the ocean? However, given the lighting, it looks a lot closer to the surface than it should. Also, I don't know why they didn't utilize bioluminescence. That's one of the most beautiful things about the sea. Maybe it just wasn't in the budget, but it would have really helped. As for the story, The Little Mermaid is a love story, at least the Disney one is. I think the original one is supposed to be a really depressing story with a really sad ending. I haven't read it. Had the writers not overcomplicated by adding the political aspect to it, this live-action remake could have worked. This could have been a better fleshed-out love story between Ariel and Eric. I know there is this controversy with the animated version about Ariel having the powers of a siren and unintentionally putting Eric under a spell. The remake tiptoed around this without directly addressing it, and honestly, I think that should have been the story. I think they should have emphasized more on the siren aspect of mermaids, and if they did want some kind of politics in the story, let the queen be aware of Atlantis. Let there be some kind of secret treaty between the two kingdoms, and Ursula is wanting to trigger a war between the two. I think what did the story end for me was a lack of follow through, and obviously that was due to the writers clearly not knowing what direction they were wanting to take. What I believed helped contribute to this was what I said in the beginning of the video. While trying to fix Ariel's decision making, they also had to have that valuable life lesson sprinkled in there through the politics that they added, which diverted from the main plot of the story, and as a result the story and the characters all felt disjointed. Now let's finally talk about the elephant in the room. I always try to give the creators and producers the benefit of the doubt when everyone else gladly shits on the decisions they make. Obviously, we don't know the full context of why decisions are made, and because of that, it gives leeway to excuse some of these decisions. However, there is a limit to how much and to what degree people will excuse, and I've reached mine. Mistakes were made, which brings me to the most egregious part of this film: the music. I'm not a professional, and all I can do is give my honest opinion, and my honest opinion is that these changes was not made out of the concern of young impressionable girls. Instead, I believe these decisions were made by self-important individuals that want the acknowledgement and praise of their accomplishments but lack any real talent to accumulate such regards. So instead, they choose to stand on the shoulders of giants, take their accomplishments, and alter it to whatever degree necessary that will get them the praise they believe they're entitled to. The changes to these iconic songs was arrogant and ignorant of whoever made the claims that these lyrics were harmful. Howard Ashman and Alan Menken was the talent behind some of the most iconic Disney songs that reign supreme to this day. I didn't think this was going to piss me off the way it did. I knew of Howard Ashman's legacy. I watched the documentary when it came out, but after watching the movie and then the documentary again, it left a bitter taste in my mouth. This man knew he was dying, and instead of spending what time he had left with his partner and family, he instead chose to commit to his work. That shows how much he cared about the projects he was a part of and how dedicated he was to having it done right. Disney was in a bit of a slog when Howard Ashman came on board, and thanks to his contributions, Disney's success skyrocketed. And how does the company thank this man? By claiming that his songs are harmful and re-editing them. Final thoughts: the movie was okay in general. There's nothing extraordinary about it except for all the controversy that came with it, which is unfortunate because that is probably what this film will best be remembered by. Regardless, if you like it, that's great. This film just wasn't for me. Truth is, I don't know what I was expecting when watching this movie. I was just curious to know what all the noise was about. The one thing I can say with confidence about this film is I'm disappointed that they didn't give special mention to Howard Ashman in the credits. They did credit him for the lyrics, but it's a blink and you miss it moment. This now makes me wonder if they gave him any special mention in the Beauty and the Beast remake. Overall, I don't regret watching the movie, just like I hope you didn't regret watching this video. Thanks for watching, and like and subscribe.